Welcome to the G&M on M&G podcast. My name's Gordie. I'm here with Michael. We are the video podcast for Matchsticks and Gasoline, and today we're here after maybe one of the best games any of us have witnessed in quite some time, and we just felt like we had to hop on a podcast here and get some thoughts out on that because it was a unique game in almost every single aspect, and I know both of us are just super excited to talk about that. So I'll let Michael maybe kick it off with some of his initial thoughts on that barn burner.
Well, yeah, I had kind of no idea what to expect going into the game last night, just with the Flames really having nothing to play for. But just coming into it, they were in a weird spot that like if they had lost, the Nashville probably would definitely have been their opponent. I was saying like if they lose, that's like you're playing an opponent then the playoffs that swept them in the regular season. So I don't know. It was kind of weird going into the game because Nashville obviously still trying to secure their playoff fate, and they did by getting a point last night. But man, I just off the hop, like hats off to the Flames for like matching their intensity all night long. They got down three times and came back three times. Like I I again we talk about 2018-19 a lot, but like that team kind of just like played out the stretch, but this team is actually like battling down the stretch in games where like there's pretty much literally nothing to play for the Flames, but they're coming out with performances like that and getting 2 points at again when it really doesn't matter, but it's nice to see them doing it.
Yeah, like you could argue that like the Flames' best playoff performance in recent history was without a doubt 2015, and like that team had to play with that emotion to get a playoff spot like much later into the regular season than the 2017 or 2019 teams had to. And I mean, we saw how that translated. Like they played a superb series against the Canucks that year, and the other 2 years, like they got swept by the Ducks and reverse swept by the Avalanche. And those last couple weeks leading up to the playoffs there, like they had the Black Aces game. They especially in 2017 they had that 10 game winning streak, and then after that they were like a 500 team to close out the year, and almost they still had to fight for a playoff spot despite winning those 10 games in a row. So I agree with you, like the Predators had every reason to play for their lives last night. Like obviously they clinched a playoff spot, with no help to themselves. But yeah, I mean the intensity in that game was like it's not even fair to say it was a playoff game. I think like that's one of those unique one-off games where people are going to be talking about for weeks to come. Obviously until the
Mm-hmm.
playoffs, but yeah, like from physicality to goals to the emotion, like it was just like what a treat to watch, quite honestly.
Yeah, there's something about Calgary and Nashville that just feels like every time they play, like no matter if it's early season or like late season, we just get a very enjoyable game to watch. Again, I feel like every game with Nashville, it's like 4-3 in overtime or like 5-4 in overtime, and both teams just go at each other all night long. And it's talked about a lot, and like I could be very on board with it for a playoff series, but at the same time, like Nashville feels like a team that if you come out of a series with them, even if you win that series, like you're gonna be pretty beat up going into the next round. So I don't know. Back to last night's game, like yeah, I again coming into it, I didn't really know what to expect, but Calgary came out, they got the first goal, and then things got kind of crazy from there. Like Lucic got in a fight, Goodbranson got in a fight, guys were throwing hits, like Kachuk was just having a blast out there. Like it was really nice to see that in like what you would probably say is their probably last real like huge playoff tune up. I know they have Minnesota coming up, but to see that against a team that was also desperate last night was really impressive.
No, and I agree. And, despite, the game probably would have ended differently had Charles not gotten hurt and stayed in the net. Like Nashville very likely could have pulled out the win. But, to the Flames' credit, they still scored 3 goals on him. He didn't look like a unbeatable goalie or anything. So, um, yeah, I agree with you though. The hitting was just insane. Like when Lucic took that interference penalty with 2:48 left and they're losing, like it was worth it. The hit was worth it, and in hindsight, it's
Yeah.
100% worth it. But at the time, it was like, like damn it, like
Yeah.
that's the end right there. Yeah, like, did you have any more thoughts on that game?
Well,
Like,
just I would just say like the tying goal, like we often talk about buzzer beaters in hockey, like a few seconds left. But I can't remember the last time I saw a goal where it was like the clock hit 0.0 before the puck even hit the back of the net, and he was still like shooting it with like point 0.2 left. Like that was just so impressive. And that it again, to me, just like in my head, it comes back to like, oh, did the timekeeper like stop like a point, couple second, like a point, whatever second too earlier in the period, things like that. But yeah, it was just really, yeah, like you said, to see them kind of stay with it, and even after that late penalty, I know they took a few too many penalties last night, but to see him stick with it, see him come back, and then see them win it in overtime too. Like Lindholm and Kachuk both at 41. Now, I really hope Gaudreau gets 40, but man, it was just, again, just one of those performances that really makes you believe this team's going to be different kind of once the playoffs start in less than a week now.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can remember the last time there was like a ridiculously small amount of time left because it was I think February 2020 and the Flames were winning 4-3 against the Predators with like 2 seconds left, and I decided that was a good time to start writing the title for the recap of the game, and of course I made
Of
it
course.
something along the lines of Flames win, and in the my other tab I watched Michael Granlund score with like it was like zero point 0.1 seconds as well, and since that day I have never preemptively written a title again. So, but that just speaks again to like these insane Calgary Nashville games. Like that one, Nashville won in overtime. I mean, we all remember the Kachuk
Yeah.
Halloween between the leg game winner. I don't know how many years ago it was now, but there was that like 6-5 game where I think Calgary had like a 5-1 lead, blew the lead, and then won in overtime. Like there's
There
nothing particularly like exciting about Nashville. It's been a long time since they've had a superstar until, probably Roman Yossi this year, the last couple of years. It's always like a game where I don't think I've ever been excited to play Nashville, and yet like the quality of the product on ice is just I don't even know if like Oilers games can stack up to it at this point. Like it's just
yeah.
out of this world what these two teams get out of each other.
Yeah, and if like I think a playoff series would just add even more to that this year if we see that happen. But like, yeah, just for whatever reason, like you said, like I don't think anyone when Nashville comes to town, I don't think it's a particularly hot ticket, but you just seem to get your money's worth regardless of where you're watching it. Like I even think back in the early 2000s when it was a Kipper and Thomas Vokoun draw off the mitts, like that was pretty cool too. Like again, yeah, like you said, it's not a team that you just circle on the schedule, but I would say they're like the anti Minnesota Wild, where it's like the Wild are coming, like, oh crap, it's gonna be like a 2-1 game. But if you're playing Nashville, for whatever reason, no matter how good or bad either of the two teams are at the time, it's always like 5-4, fast paced, high scoring. So I can get very on board with this series, although I don't know where Nashville sits now with Saros. It looks like he's already out the rest of or the last two games of the season here, and then I don't know. Usually, when we see guys diagnosed as being out that early, like it's not always the best, especially when you consider the playoffs are like anything more than like a 1.5, 2 week injury might do it for his year. So I don't know. Where do you kind of stand on like a Nashville team without Saros versus with Saros?
It's not good. Like I think we're gonna come back to kind of the nitty gritty of the Nashville team a bit later, but like I think Saros as good as he is, like he doesn't have out of this world numbers this year. Like the Nashville defense is certainly not a perfect unit by any means. They're a long ways removed from that foursome of guys they had before the Vegas expansion draft, where they used half of their protection picks on their D-men.
Mhm.
So, without Sorrows, like as much as like I don't have any hate for David Riddick, I'm not gonna pile on the bandwagon of guys, but like he's just had an incredibly tough year, like just really poor numbers. I mean, both goals last night were not good. Like, let's be real, he
Mhm.
gave up 2 goals on 5 shots. And a lot of Predators fans have some hope in Connor Ingram, who, in previous years has had some really impressive AHL numbers and has looked like a really, promising young goalie, but his numbers have taken a dip this year. He hasn't performed that well in either of his two NHL starts. So, between those two, like it's really tough to say what kind of goaltending you can get, but I mean it's NHL hockey. Like it seems
Mhm.
like any goaltender can turn into, Andrew Hammond at any point and, ride a hot streak. So it's tough to write them off, but man, like losing a key cog like Saros at this point would be just
Mhm.
devastating for Nashville.
Yeah, totally. He's completely done pretty much everything for that team this year. I know they've had Yossi at a Norris level, and Forsberg's been pretty good too, but yeah, without Saros, it seems like it's like a team that's maybe would steal one game in a series, but would just be on the verge of just being pushed over at that point. So I don't know. I hope he's okay just because he has been such an elite goalie this year, and like I'd like to play Nashville at their best. But on a selfish Flames note, if they're without him for the playoffs, I think you've pretty much got to be hoping Nashville. But I think we'll get into that some more. Do you have any thoughts? I know I kind of ragged on Minnesota a few minutes ago, but do you have any thoughts ahead of this game on Thursday? I guess.
It'll be interesting to see how these two teams come out. Like, I think the Winnipeg game on whatever I think it's Saturday or Friday or whatever. But
Hmm.
I think Winnipeg's gonna have a lot of young guys out there. Like, I think that could be that'll be a Dan Vladar start, or maybe even a Dustin Wolf start if he comes back up.
Hmm.
So yeah, this Nashville game, it seems like one of those games where each other will kind of see who ices what players and maybe feel each other out a little bit. But seeing how the Flames deployed themselves against Nashville, and neither, or I don't know, can like Minnesota and the Blues are still battling for home ice advantage, I believe, or has either of them
Yeah,
locked it up?
they're both at 109. Minnesota has a game in hand, but St. Louis has the regulation win tiebreak. So Minnesota, I think they lost. They lost to Arizona last night too, which really hurts them. So I'm just looking at who their other games are for those two teams. Like Minnesota has the Flames, and then I'm just trying to see. Yeah, Minnesota's other game is the Avalanche, who may or may not be putting their best foot forward in that game. So we'll have to see. Yeah, I think we're gonna get a pretty angry or ready to go Minnesota team. And then the Blues have Vegas, so like if Vegas is still in it, they might be trying. But I still think we're gonna see a Minnesota team that's gonna come out, give it their best shot, especially because Calgary embarrassed them earlier in the year. But
Yeah.
I'm not nearly as excited as I was for the Nashville game, just because again, it is Minnesota. It's never fun.
They're definitely with Kaprizov and some of the guys they have now, they're certainly not the Minnesota Wild of old, but I agree it's still a little dull when they come to town. As of right now, to get some kind of live information, like the Knights are down 2-1 to Chicago and Dallas is up
Oh my
2-0 on the
gosh.
Coyotes. So,
So that's
you
pretty
know,
much it.
that's pretty much the wrap on the night season. So yeah,
Good.
they could very well ice a very different roster in that final game. So yeah, but I think a fun topic we wanted to kind of get into, and it's kind of bizarre, but we just wanted to talk about some kind of the best games we've ever witnessed as Flames fans, because despite it being a regular season game with very few implications, like last night's game is going to rank up there for pretty much everyone about as young as us who didn't really get to witness all that much of the '04 Cup run,
Mhm.
and certainly not the '89 win. So it just kind of made me realize that, the best games in hockey, the games that are the most fun, you need some misery. You need like some things to go wrong because, you know, the way hockey works, you'd expect those 9-1 Arizona games to rank up there, or 9-5 Edmonton games where there's just a lot of goals and not a lot of negatives. But like the games last night where you're at kind of these anger points, these worry points, and then it's just all catharsis at the end. It just made us think about kind of some of the best games we've got to witness as Flames fans these past couple of years, and I'll let you maybe start it off with a particular game that is a comparable to last night.
Well, I would say like the 9-5 Edmonton game was just a lot of fun being there this year. But yeah, like you said, I think we need a couple of games where things were going very not right and then turned around. I don't know. I'll probably jump on one playoff example that jumps to mind. I guess it was two games that were very similar, but I think the first one has to be the game six against the Canucks, like 3-0 early in the first period for Vancouver. Like it looks like the series is going to head back for game seven, which who knows what happens then. Like, and then to see them just chip their way back, like Ferland scores, they eventually get it back to even, but then Vancouver takes another lead. And then to see Stajan finally get like that goal with 3 or 4 minutes left, the guy who like it still gives me chills to this day, just like that to see Matt Stajan score that winning goal with that somehow amazing line of him and like David Jones in the playoffs. Like it was one of those moments that just kind of always will stick with me. And then just them icing with the two empty netters hits home too. Like I would have that right up there in terms of like the more recent Flames memories in terms of like games that are pretty awesome. How about yourself?
Yeah, I think we have probably two of the same games on this list, and I think that just kind of speaks to the emotional state you're in because I have that game without a doubt. Like, yeah, the Flames had lost Game 5. They were down in that the huge deficit in the first. Switched goalies. It didn't look good. It looked like they were going to go back to Vancouver for Game 7, and then yeah, just that the 3-goal comeback and then goal number 4, like what a game. And I mean, Matt Stajan is certainly not going to go down as a all-time great Flame or something, but like that goal is still probably, one of the best goals we've ever seen in our life. And I mean, I had to go watch those highlights right before we did this just because, that's how exciting that package is. And then
Mm-hmm.
my other game is from the exact same playoff series, Game 3 against Anaheim, the 4-3 overtime win. It was a lot of the same. It felt actually a little bit like last night. The Flames they were losing 2-1, then 3-2. And of course, we all remember the Sam Bennett wraparound hits Frederik Andersen's toe in the net. We all think that's going to be called in, and then horrible flashbacks to 2004 when the exact same type of goal was waved off. And then, Johnny Gaudreau had his first real kind of, all-time great moment where Anaheim misses the empty net. He comes back down and scores the game time goal with 20 seconds left. And I mean, the relief of seeing that goal in was right up there with that .1 goal last
Mm.
night. And then Michael Backlund ices it in overtime. So,
Yeah,
I mean, just to put a regular season game kind of on the same level as those two playoff games, like I think it really speaks to the quality of hockey you got to see last night, and the emotions you feel during these games are what make these stick in your brain as long-term memories, and you just remember all the small things, and you forget about the sadness and the misery of seeing the other team score, and you just have the good result at the end of the night.
yeah. That Anaheim game was just ridiculous. Like I remember I had hurt my knee at like a soccer game like a week before that, and like I couldn't walk for like that series. But I was laying on the couch watching the game when Gaudreau tied it. I jumped off the couch and added an extra week to my rehab when I landed. And yeah, even though you kind of knew even then like the series probably wasn't going to go their way, just that like you said, just all that catharsis that came out with him tying the goal with like 20 seconds left like that was just one of those ones that'll stick with you forever. Another game I wanted to look at, it's a little bit older. It was back in '08 or the '07-08 season. It was game 3 against the Sharks. That was that game where Calgary got down like 3-0 in the first like 4 minutes. And then there was that like infamous Corey Sarge hit on Patrick Marleau where he just ran him over and completely changed the game. And I don't know, that one has just stuck with me for a long time too, where they eventually kind of clawed their way back. Like Iggy scored in the first. Damon
Oh,
Langkow
Nolan.
got one. Yeah, Nolan Nolan game winner with like 3.5 minutes left, and Curtis Joseph's only one of his only 4 wins with the Flames. Like just a crazy game like that. That's a little bit more back in the times. And even though they didn't win that series, like that game still sticks with me just because we always see that hit every now and then.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's right up there for me as well. In terms of like a regular season game, at least one I attended. I can't remember what season it was, but it was when Dougie Hamilton was here and the Flames were playing the Bruins. It might have been his first game even against them. And I think it was Gaudreau had a hat trick. Like the Flames got down
Mhm.
4-3 on like a penalty shot with like a minute left, and then tied it with like 10 seconds left, and then Gaudreau won it with like a hat trick goal in overtime. Like that for me just stands out as like a regular season game that was just kind of crazy too. So yeah, those are two other games for me that just like will always kind of stick with me.
Yeah, like that 2015 season, like they called them like, the comeback kids for a reason. There was just so many games where they
Mm-hmm.
tied it up in the last minute or had those third period comebacks. They were, that team was not good in hindsight, but man, like were they fun to watch. The like the Josh Juris uh what's his name? Schlemko goals in the shootout against Boston. Like those are they made some great memories that year,
Yeah.
and winning a series was the perfect way to top it off. It just makes you that much more excited for this year where they're going back into the playoffs and they're a legitimate force to contend with. A thing I kind of noted too on these like really important games is Johnny Gaudreau takes a lot of flack for allegedly disappearing in the playoffs and kind of disappearing in these big games. But that Vancouver game 6 as a rookie, he had a goal and 2 assists. One assist was on the one empty netter, but a goal and an assist were crucial in the comeback. The game 5, Anaheim game, he had the tying goal, 20 seconds left. You can't get much more clutch than that. And then, quietly last night in Nashville, he put up 2 assists in that game too. Like, the guy doesn't disappear in these physical games. He has, I think, 19 points in 30 career playoff games, which
Like
is
it's
certainly not bad. Like the flack he takes for the playoffs, like there's really only one series where he's quote unquote disappeared, and it was Colorado. He had 1 assist in 5 games. But like 2015, 9 points in 11 games. 2017, 2 assists in 4 games, which is not great. And then in 2020, he had 7 points in 10 games again. Like he's not as big of a disappearing act as these people seem to think. And not a single one of those games has he played with Elias Lindholm and
mhm.
Matthew Tkachuk. So, I mean, it's going to be a clean slate for Gaudreau, and I don't think these critics and Eric Francis's of the world are
Oh, wow.
basing basing these criticisms off necessarily fact. Like, the Colorado series hurt us all greatly, but like Colorado snuck into those playoffs as a team we had no idea what they were, and pretty much since that series they've been, arguably the best team in the league, not named the
Hmm.
Tampa Bay Lightning.
Yeah, some guy by the name of Kilmacar just decided to come in as it like I know he's still getting better each year, but like he came into that series as like a top pairing offensive defenseman, like on the spot, which is just like you don't see that pretty much ever where a rookie steps in like in the playoffs for his first few games and just does what he did there. So I'm right there with you. For me, for Gaudreau, one thing I think I saw, it kind of got lost in all the other chaos that was last night's game, but him doing that like fake punch on Dante Fabro, making him flinch. Like I don't know, that's just something I think that makes me think it's going to be different for him this year. Like he seems like he's ready to get like right in those scrums with like Kachuk when he starts it inevitably. So I'm very excited to watch that line like perform in the playoffs. And then like I think another guy I want to get into real quick was Dylan Dubé, who's suddenly just like gone from having a pretty disappointing season to like he's going to finish with decent numbers, but is also just absolutely flying out there right now. So kind of like, what are your thoughts on Dubé's kind of, I don't want to say like explosion of goals, but like it's pretty close to that over the last couple of weeks here.
Yeah, like, Calle Yarncroke still hasn't scored a goal for Calgary, but like you can't just like this Dubé emergence, like he has clearly found a centerman that he personally has a ton of chemistry with.
Mm-hmm.
And like Dubé seems to be like a very like emotional skater, which seems kind of weird, but like you can almost see how his confidence is and where he's at, just the way he's skating. And like, this first goal last night was really nice, but that second goal, like he makes a nice cut back in the neutral zone, steps over the blue line, and just rips a wrist shot over a really premier goalie. Like that kind of confidence is just exactly what we saw in that Dallas series in 2020, and really haven't seen since. So
Mm-hmm.
we talk about guys peaking too early, blah blah blah. Like Dylan Dubé is just hitting a different gear going into the playoffs, and should a team be able to kind of hold back that top line, like, the Calgary has a 35 goal scorer on one line, and, all of a sudden a potentially 20 goal scorer on another. Like
Mm-hmm.
depth is the number one killer in the playoffs. And, what a look this team is starting to develop late in the season.
Yeah, just with like Dubé, I just wanted to double check what his contract situation is, but I believe he's still got a couple years at like around a couple $1 million, like 2 more years at 2.3. Like should we lose one of the top guys next year? Like he seems a guy, even if we don't lose one of the top guys, it just seems primed to step into an even bigger role next season. So just to see the way he's emerged here and like he shows flashes of this talent all the time, like you said, but if he can kind of bring this for the playoffs and with Calle Yarncrook, who I think if you got a couple million left over kind of once you kind of get deals laid out for the top guys, like I think you have to look at bringing him back too, just like you said, how he's elevated some of these guys that had kind of hadn't really found their spot in the lineup earlier in the season here. Like, I think you got to keep as much of this core together as you can past the season. I know it's going to be pretty close to impossible with like a few of these like more higher paid guys, but like some of these depth pieces, I think you got to kind of look at moving what you can to even keep them as well.
Yeah, and like that, this is just the forward stuff. Like
Mhm.
when they made that Carolina trade, like Elias Lindholm was like right away a huge improvement on, a really good Michael Furlan, but he was just a different level of defensive or offensive play, sorry. And we kind of knew we were going to take a downturn in skill from Dougie Hamilton to Noah Hannafin, offensively certainly, maybe overall. But like man, like the Calgary might have two 50-point defensemen this year, which even with the monster Mark Giordano season and a surprise Dennis Weidman season in 2015, like Calgary's never had that. Like just
Hmm.
the offensive explosion from their decor this year, and like it's not like it was all early and they're just kind of riding that. Like they just continue to be so good as we keep going through the year. Like what have you seen out of the D?
Well, yeah, it's just been just the steadiness of guys that you're gonna get from like Chris Tanev. I thought Oliver Shillington has kind of elevated his game again after he kind of went through a bit of a lull there ever since he got hit in that Minnesota game. I thought he missed a few games, looked like he was kind of still making some mistakes again, but he seems to be kind of getting right back there to himself. But yeah, Noah Hannafin, that's just the player that you have to watch and just see like I didn't think he had another gear to his game coming into the season. I know he took a step last year, but man, if he keeps taking steps, like it's not a stretch to put him like kind of almost up into that higher conversation of like maybe like top 15 D men in the league. Like he's getting his way up there. He has 20 points in his last 17 games, which like is the highest amongst all defensemen in the league. He's so solid with Rasmus Anderson right now that like you said, they might have got two superstars in a trade that it looked like maybe they had lost at the time, but now it's just reaping rewards with each passing season. It's something to really watch out there.
Yeah, and like Rasmus Anderson got took off that first power play unit, and it wasn't even because he wasn't doing good. The guy's got 50 points already this year. Just with how well Hannafin's been playing and how well Anderson was playing too, like they were able to kind of get the better shooting defenseman now in the second power play
Hmm.
unit and elevate Hannafin up. And like man, has that second power play unit looked deadly lately with Dubé and Anderson. Like they've I think probably scored more power play goals in the last couple of games than that top unit, and like that's just huge. Like
Yeah,
there's been
totally.
times this year where they roll out that second unit and it's not even close to the same quality as the first. So not just 5-on-5 play. Like these guys emerging, eh, should we talk about maybe Tyler Toffoli and kind of the downturn he's suddenly taken,
Yeah,
seemingly?
I think it's interesting that like in amongst kind of how everyone's been playing this year, like it's I don't want to say I forgot that he's a flame, but it's just kind of like, oh, he's also there too. Like I'm just looking at his numbers. Like he has 23 points in 35 games with the team. He had 26 and 37 with Montreal, so a little bit less, but roughly what he scored on, I would say on average for most of his career. Like what's that, 49 points in 72 games. So like a still pretty good season, but yeah, it's almost just like he's kind of on the back burner right now, which maybe is almost a good thing because you're gonna have teams kind of teeing up to defend your big guns, your top line, your Mangiapanis, even your Dubés. Now I think is worthy of a conversation. So it's been a bit of a downturn. It's been a little bit tough to see Toffoli just kind of like I said, kind of he's just there, but he's not really like creating a ton. Which to be fair, it's never been his mo. He's always been a finisher and not much else. But Matt, it does seem like a kind of guy that it wouldn't shock me if he went off for like a goal per game kind of thing once the playoffs roll around, just because he is kind of creeping back there in the weeds, but there's not really a lot of talk about him.
Yeah, like it's so inspiring, I think, to see how, many forwards the Flames have in that top nine that, if somebody's having an off night, like it's not like all of a sudden you're now having, Brett Ritchie is like your third liner who has to go and score now. Like a Mangiapane, a Dubé doesn't score, like you still have, Blake Coleman, Michael Backlund,
Mm.
Tyler Toffoli. Like it's such good depth up front. And really, like I've been quite harsh on guys like Lucic and Ritchie and Lewis, but like how good have they looked the last couple of games? Not just, the hits and the fights, but like they set up that Noah Hannafin goal last night, just by hard work. Lucic wins a faceoff, Brett Ritchie wins a puck battle, gets it back to Hannafin. Lucic is standing in front of the net. Like they've started to really pull their weight. And, watching Lucic last night, like, for everything he does bad with the puck, like, man, that guy is a force on the ice.
Yeah, for Lucic especially, it's I don't think it's a huge stretch to say this could be his last kind of kick at the can this year. Like I know he's a guy who's openly said he's contemplated retirement before, so whether or not he decides to take another kick at it after the season, it's coming kind of clear it probably won't be with the Flames, depending on what they decide to do with his contract. So, for a guy like him, you see him like every night just laying it all out on the line for the team. And man, come playoffs when things get a little bit tighter, he's just gonna be a guy that's gonna give you that extra bit of breathing room to make a move, to get a shot through, to tie up somebody in front, to get a rebound. Like I'm excited to see what he can do because although we kind of saw a bit of him in the bubble, but like I think just like with fans in the building, seeing him out there in the playoffs, I think it's going to be something really fun. And for a fan base that already loves to get behind Lucic during the regular season, like I just imagine like he scores a playoff goal or something, and people just lose their minds or throws a big hit. Like he's the guy I think that can turn a game almost on a dime with how he plays, as long as he does it a little bit more wise than he did in the last few games here too.
Yeah, and like how big is it for some of these guys on the Flames to be playing these important games with the crowd energy? Like I said it a bunch of times during Kachuk's, kind of off season last year and, not a great playoffs, the year before. Like the guy just so clearly feeds off that like not just energy, but like hateful energy. Like every
Mhm.
single Predators fan in that arena last night wants him dead. And he scores that goal with zero point 0.1 seconds left. Like it's like he calms down the more, insane things are. He's smiling and banging on the glass in the penalty box. Like the guy he just feeds off that energy so well. And it's just going to get more intense as these weeks go on. Like it's just going to be so cool to watch, some of these guys play a real playoff series after kind of the the letdown of the bubble and kind
Mhm.
of the lameness of calling that playoff hockey. So, yeah, I'm just so excited for that. And I think this will be a good transition into our next topic, which is just kind of talking about the Stars and Predators, who at the time of this recording are deadlocked in points in the standings. And, Nashville has the regulation tiebreaker, but really at this point, it's really tough to say who Calgary will face because with Riddick or Ingram and net these last couple of games, like Nashville could very well lose out, and Dallas could certainly win out. And we've been focused on Nashville all this time, and all of a sudden we could be playing the Stars. So I think we just kind of wanted to contrast and compare these two teams a little bit, talk about
Mhm.
strengths and weaknesses. So yeah, if you want to kick that off.
Well, I just wanted to say, like, real quick, looking at the standings, like, Dallas is kind of a fraud, in my opinion. Like, when you look at their regulation wins, they have 45 total wins and just 30 in regulation. Like, that's worse than the Knights, the Canucks. Only one more than the Jets. It's three less than the Islanders, who are 18 points out in the East. Like, it just strikes me as a team that's like they're pretty lucky to be where they are. So they're like 15-5 in extra time games, which most years that doesn't happen. Most years you're a coin flip at best. So I guess that gives you some kind of look into how important it is to win those extra time games. But at the same time, like Dallas, who's up, I believe 3-0 now on the Coyotes. Like I don't know, between the two teams, I've been weighing it back and forth. I think for me, I still prefer Dallas, and that seemed to be the fan opinions before yesterday's game. Was that Dallas seemed like the more ideal matchup for the Flames just because Saros had the ability to steal a series. The one thing that I think Dallas has an edge on over the two is I think Rick Bowness, their coach, has quite a bit more experience than John Hines on Nashville. But it's one of those things where I don't even think I have a huge preference anymore. Like I think the Flames are a team that's going to play their game regardless of who their opponent is. But I know you had a few guys kind of on each team you want to focus on as we kind of break down these two possible matchups.
Yeah, I thought it would just be maybe a good idea to kind of break it down by positional strengths. And I mean, we'll start it off with, at this point, it's not even really a discussion, but goaltending, like, if it's Ottinger versus Saros, like it's easily Saros, but, we're realistically now talking Ottinger versus Ingram slash Riddick. So, like in that case, like, it's such a, Jake Ottinger's certainly not been bad. And he really, like, he was so clutch in that shootout last night. He looked very unbeatable. But the goaltending matchup has all of a sudden become like the least important aspect of this because, if Saros is out, like it's not even a close discussion anymore.
Yeah, for sure. Like without Saros, like there's not really an edge for either team in my opinion. Like you've kind of got an older veteran Wedgwood, and then you got a young guy in Ottinger for Dallas. And then same kind of thing with Riddick and Ingram, who it sounds like it could be very much like a what's it called, a goalie controversy between the
Mhm.
two there. So yeah, I think again, goaltending was the one thing that swayed the argument kind of away from Nashville. But I don't know, when I look at the forward core of the two teams, like you kind of gotta like for on Nashville, you got Matt Duchene, who's suddenly a 40 goal scorer again very quietly. But Philip Forsberg, there's some other guys there, like Philip Tomasino, I think is a guy who could impress in the playoffs. But for me, I still give the edge on the forward core to Dallas. They've had that ridiculous line like Nick Robertson, Joe Pavelski this year that just I think you could put them up there as kind of like right behind almost the Flames top line in terms of how effective all three of those guys have been. So I don't know, where do you kind of stand on the forward cores between the teams?
Yeah, no, I agree. As someone who owned Jason Robertson in fantasy this year, like what a performance those three guys had. I think the problem with Dallas is like that line had something ridiculous, like 35 to 40% of their total goals this year. Like they are pretty much the definition of a one-line team. Like, Tyler Sagan and Jamie Benn are still pretty good players, but at this point they're pretty much husks of their former selves, and they take a backseat to those three guys all day long. And then after that, like Dallas's forward depth just drops way off. Like they've had a pretty steady rotation of AHLers and depth guys come through. Like Alex Radulov has just fallen off the face of the earth. I think he's hurt right now anyway. He might be scratched. Denis Gurianov, who looked so promising at one point and, scored 4 goals against the Flames, like has just
Mm-hmm.
not done anything since. And like I said, he's been a frequent scratch this year too. So, top heavy, you give it to Dallas, but I think Nashville has 5 really strong forwards who, none of them I think are particularly better than the other, but Ryan Johansson, Michael Granlund, Matt Duchene, Philip Forsberg, and Tanner Jeannot have all been really good this year. It's kind of a forward by committee in that organization. They don't have as much of the top end talent, despite I think, in my opinion, a kind of 2 fraudulent 40 goal seasons. But again, like their bottom six depth and those other guys, like there's not that much there. There's a lot of spare part guys skating, I think, in the bottom six of both teams. So it's kind of a give and take. In my opinion, I'd rather face a top heavy one line and kind of deal with 3 others. So I guess in that sense, I would give the edge to Nashville, in my opinion. But I mean, they both have they're both quite different in how they split up their strengths.
Yeah, I was when the Flames lined up against Dallas last week, I was kind of stunned to see their roster. Like it almost feels like it's like you said, a one line team with maybe a couple other decent guys and like almost an AHL lineup behind that. When you consider again it's a one line top heavy team, like you have the backline line, you can shut them down with you have the Yarn Crook line if you want to shut them down. Like we didn't quite get into this earlier, but Blake Coleman is a player I'm so excited to watch in the playoffs. Like he's just wild in the regular season. Like I think I said it, I don't know if it's on Twitter or on a podcast or this year, but it's like you see everyone doing like the smelling salts on the bench, and it looks like Coleman's like eating them. Like he just has that crazy look in his eye all game long. So I'm very excited to watch how he kind of works on like a shutdown line in the playoffs. But yeah, I'm right there with you. I think I give a slight edge on the forward group to Nashville just because you said they look like they're a little bit deeper and they have a few guys that could get hot for a few games versus Dallas. It's like you shut that top line there. I think they go pretty quietly into the night.
Yeah, and then I think if we kind of touch on the last group, I think it kind of flip-flops because I think Nashville is kind of top heavy where they have like an absolutely, he's going to win the Norris in my opinion, and defenseman in Roman Yossi, and they have some pretty good guys after that, like Matthias Ekholm isn't as good as he once was, but he's still a very solid defenseman, and then Dante Fabro and Alex Carrier are two pretty solid right shot defensemen. But after Yossi, it definitely does kind of fall off. Whereas I feel like Dallas maybe doesn't still have that number one as much as Miro Heiskanen is still a really good defenseman. He still hasn't kind of taken that superstar step yet. But as a committee, I mean, they have Heiskanen, Klingberg, Ryan Suter. Like they have some really solid names, I think, and they're a really veteran group and a really heavy group, and I think they've really covered a lot of Dallas's defects this year and got them to those, extra time games that they're able to win. So defensively, I think, in my opinion, Dallas definitely has the edge, but we saw Roman Yossi last night. Like the guy's just scoring at an insane pace. He's just as talented as any forward at this point, and I mean, he scored and I think had an assist. So
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think for the way I kind of look at it, it's like you have Nashville, they have like the one like top pairing kind of is how I would call, or like two top pairing guys, whereas like I would say Dallas almost has like four top four kind of guys and then it falls off. So I don't know. I just don't see Nashville being able to compete, at least defensively with Dallas. I think it's you got to give the edge at least to Dallas. Like you said, they've got just a few more guys, a little bit more experience, just a little bit more stability back there. And yeah, God forbid for Nashville, like if something happens to Roman Yossi, that whole decor I think falls apart in the same way we said with Saros. Like their team might fall apart. So I got to give the edge to Dallas right now, although I don't think it's a particularly huge edge. The other thing I think with Dallas is that they have a fairly similar like goals against to Nashville, but Nashville obviously had the ridiculous goaltending this year. So yeah, I'm right there with you. I think Dallas is the team defensively that would be the tougher matchup for the Flames. But in saying that, I still think Calgary has the edge almost in all three position groups on either of these two teams. So I'm not super concerned either way, but defensively, definitely Dallas over Nashville.
I really liked that Calgary played Vladar these last two games against Nashville because no matter how these games went, like they didn't play their starting goalie and they still, got 3 or 4 points, as did Nashville. But like they don't have as good of a read on Markstrom. I can't even remember that first game against Nashville was way back at the beginning of the season. So yeah, like it's tough to say which you'd prefer. I think it really is going to come down to what Saros's deal is. You never want to like hope for an injury, but like without him, like Nashville's just a completely different team. Dallas, of course, seems to have a lot of flame killers. Like Miro Heiskanen
Mhm.
scored like no other time he has in his career in that playoff series, and John Klingberg did as well. So
Joe Pavelski eats the Flames alive. It feels like every
yeah,
time they play. Yeah, they're a messy team to play against for sure.
yeah, so there's definitely like there's no easy route. I mean, if you play a whole series like those two teams did last night, you're going to be pretty beat up for potentially an equally punishing series against the Oilers or Kings. So maybe in that regard, I'd prefer to play the Stars, but at this point, like
Hmm.
it's too close to even tell who they're going to play. Like Dallas is going to win tonight, so they're going to move into that, top wild card spot for the time being. So I mean, we'll have to just wait and see. But either way, I agree with you. I think the Flames trump all three categories for both those teams.
Yeah, I'm with you too. I think as much as I'd like to see Nashville from like an entertainment perspective, I can't quite get behind the Flames playing them just because there's that element of like any other year with the Flames, like any other coach, I'd be all over Nashville instead of Dallas just because the Flames used to be a team that kind of thrived on like chaotic victories, but I think they'd rather play a team like Dallas where both teams kind of work to kind of just shut it down, but the Flames have just the raw talent edge, I think, to beat Dallas. Something with Nashville just strikes me as like, especially if Saros comes back, like they can steal one or two here or there, and suddenly it's a different series. I think Dallas, the teams play fairly similar, but Calgary just has that extra depth pretty much at all three positions where they can just grind it down into like a 5 or 6 game series victory without really thinking too much about it. The big thing I think for the Flames or for a team playing the Flames this playoffs is if you want to beat the Flames, I think you have to win at least one, if not both games in Calgary at the start of the series. I think any series that goes 6 or 7, this Flames team is just going to grind whoever they're playing into a pulp. Like they just play mean, tough hockey all night long. And like I don't see a lot of guys being able to stick with that for 6 or 7 games in a series on an opposing team. So, regardless of who they play, what round number, like if you want to beat the Flames, you have to get on them early in a series because I think after that, I think anything goes longer, like 6, 7 games, like you got to give the edge to the Flames.
Yeah, and kind of the flip side of that with how some of these Flame series have gone, like It's going to be so huge for Calgary to just go up 2-0 on whoever they play. Like they have to give themselves some breathing room and get some confidence. Like they played they didn't necessarily dominate Colorado in that game one, but like they played so well, and then to give it all up in game two, like and head back to or Colorado tied, like that really just I think changed the nature of that series. They should have gone up 2-0 in that one, and it's just like getting that second goal in a game or getting kind of a cushion of a lead. Like they just have to build something to kind of put some of these playoff demons to rest
Hmm.
early and just get some internal confidence.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was just looking back at like Sutter's runs with the Kings. Like I know 2012 that was their infamous run from the eighth seed, but like I believe it was all three series they got up 3-0, and then at that point it's just a matter of when, not if. So like if Sutter can find a way to instill something like that on them, like I'm not saying they're gonna be up 3-0 in every series because that's just ridiculous, but like you said, if they can go 2 of 2 on home ice, at least through the first couple of rounds, like again at that point, it's not nearly as I guess dominant as 3-0, but like 2-0, knowing you have to win 4 or 5 with the Flames, including two in Calgary to kind of turn that back around. Like I think that's just gonna be so critical to get off to a good start with this team because if they start well, I don't see a lot of teams that can come back, like I said, 4 or 5 against them.
Yeah, and like you raised such a good point. Like we talk about all these guys on the ice, but like the Flames' biggest X factor might be that guy standing on the bench. Like
Hmm.
he is just such a brilliant hockey mind, and he seems to get like guys to just buy in beyond belief to what he says and play the right way. That with Sutter behind the bench, like that might be the most like confidence inspiring part of this whole run. Like he's
Hmm.
just such an awesome coach to have, and he really kind of I think he's really made a lot of the more nervous and cynical Flames fans feel that confidence that they're not necessarily getting from another high scoring season, really successful season, because we saw how 2019 ended. Like we've seen this story before, but it's with a coach who just knows how to win, and all he wants to do is win. If you want to see Darryl Sutter smile and be a real pleasant guy, like win the Stanley Cup, like he turns into a different human being. And I think every single guy in that room is just wanting to get the job done, and he's clearly the guy to do it.
I mean, like at this point, if they do win the cup, like I think I'm all in for Darryl Sutter being the first guy to get it. Like screw a player, we don't have a captain. Just give it to Sutter and let him lace up the skates while he's at and go for a skate around there with it. I don't think any Flames fans would have a problem with that. Just
Yeah, like
because like I would say as big as like some of the other additions have been the last 2 or 3 years, like I don't think any single player really becomes close to what Darryl Sutter has done for this team. So like I'm all in. He wins the cup, like lace him up, Darryl, go be the first guy to go for a skate. I'm all in for that.
100%. And I mean, the culture change he's inspired in Calgary is probably the number one pull that's gonna potentially keep guys like Johnny Gaudreau in Calgary. So
Mhm.
he has just changed this entire franchise around, and it's been so awesome to see. It felt like a fever dream when he got hired last year. Like you don't always assume guys who have been around are ever gonna come back, and seeing the Calgary Flames hired Darryl Sutter, like your brain just instantly
Yeah.
flipped to that '04 run. Like, oh, I'm so excited.
Yeah, I was at a friend's place. Just watched the Flames smack the Senators, and like we'd had a few adult beverages, and then you pull up Twitter, and yeah, you see the Flames have hired Dale Sutter. Like you feel like did I like pass out and smash my head, and am I having like some really weird like concussion dream or something? But yeah, it's it. I think almost you can make the argument that like Sutter alone has just really elevated this team from like middle of the pack to the top by himself. I don't even think you can bet on Sutter to win the Jack Adams anymore. Like I'm pretty sure they shut it down just because it's such a clear favorite right now. Like I would be shocked if he doesn't like run away with the votes. Like I don't even think it's gonna be close. And frankly, I think Sutter's a coach that you can pretty much hand him a blank contract, like however many years you want to stay. He's got the farm up in Viking. Like he can just you want to keep coaching 3 years, great. You want to just do 1 or 2 more years, that's fine. You want to do 8 years because you feel like it, sure, why not? Like I don't think a team with Sutter as its leader really is gonna fall apart too much. Like I know his message in the past has gotten stale with teams, but 2 or 3 more years of this, like I'm all for it.
Yeah, like if you're a Kings fan right now, like those last couple of years of sadness are nothing because you won 2 cups under him. Like, who cares at that point? I think the best thing Darryl Sutter's ever said amongst his myriad of awesome quotes is just that, why did you come back to coach Calgary? And he just said he's a Calgary Flames fan. Like, it's just awesome to hear. He's just as invested emotionally in this team as we all are. He cares just as much about winning as we all do. And, there's no
Mhm.
greater recipe to success for that.
Yeah, but yet when I said that, I got kicked out of the Saddle Dome. So like, it doesn't seem fair. But oh well.
Yeah, so I think that's probably a good place to leave it off on a good note. So thanks for watching once again. Make sure to subscribe. Check out our website, matchsticksandgasoline.com. We cover the Flames and all their affiliates in all aspects. And yeah, thanks for watching.